In today's show, I'm partnering up with Natasha Colin, co-founder of Expanding Identities Development, to help us chat about Pride. We'll be listening in to some Capitol Pride concert attendees to find out which performer everyone was thrilled to see. We're also going to get to hear a very special backstage interview with Shea Diamond as she shares the message she wants to instill in youth, tips for mental health professionals and how to support the trans community, and how she manages her role as an activist and performer. Coming out at whatever age can be incredibly intimidating and frightening for so many people. Singer Calum Scott shared his experience with the Pride concert crowd, an experience that inspired his song, No Matter What. Natasha and I will be going into more details about how you can support someone who opens up to you during their coming out process.
Welcome to Wit and Reason, hosted by psychologist Dr. Alexis Moreno. Dr. Moreno brings her expertise to providing smart and practical explanations on human behavior, turning social science and research into relatable, accessible, and useful information you can use. Listen now as Dr. Moreno brings a little bit of positive mental health to your day.
DC celebrated another Pride with an amazing group of talented performers at the Capitol Pride concert. DC dedicated this year's Pride to commemorate 50 years since the Stonewall riots and encouraged everyone to stand up and to speak out against all forms of injustice, discrimination, and violence, wherever it exists and whatever form it takes. Now, Natasha, you're joining us from Los Angeles, California. How was Pride on the West Coast?
Pride was actually amazing this year. It's really been an amazing Pride season. There's actually been a lot of changes this year with a lot of different Prides popping up all over Los Angeles. So it's not just the big one that they celebrate in West Hollywood, but there's been other areas of Los Angeles that are throwing their own Pride. So that's been amazing to see.
Oh, that's very cool. What other cities are having their own Pride festivals?
So there's one that goes on in West Hollywood. There's also one now in Santa Monica. This is their first year. Also one in Compton. This is their first year. And then also in the outer skirts of Los Angeles that may not be able to get to attend Pride because it's a little further out.
Yeah.
So there's, a lot of different ones popping up all over the outskirts, which is just amazing to see because then people get to join in and don't have to travel too far.
That's so cool. Did any of the Prides highlight this monumental time of 50 years since Stonewall?
There's been a bit of it popping up everywhere. It's interesting because there's other alternatives to Pride, which is I went to a Dyke Day, which basically is the commemoration. Mm-hmm. And it's not just for dykes, and there's the reclamation of the word, but there's also the history behind it of how Stonewall started and the riots that happened and really honoring that. And so it's a really just amazing day, and it's completely free for anyone who wants to come and just celebrate Pride. So that was really amazing, too. But there's been a lot of visibility around it. So. Oh,
that's really great. And on the West Coast, do they also have a big concert like the way they do here in D.C.?
They do, yeah. They had a huge concert this year. I think they just started making it bigger in the last couple years. So Pride has grown bigger and bigger each year.
Yeah, and what's so great is that at least out here, I'm guessing it's the same over there, is that the concert is free to everyone. So it's very open, so everyone can enjoy the experience.
Yeah, I wish I could say the same in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, you have to pay to get into the concert here, which has been a little bit of an issue for some folks in gaining access to that. And so I think that's been a little challenging.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other free concerts that are hosted during Pride season that are kind of alternatives to that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, to get into the big one, you do have to pay here.
Oh, man. So I guess just come to DC so you can enjoy our free concert.
I know, right? Yeah, another reason to come.
We had such a great crowd, Natasha. I mean, everyone was in such a great and positive mood. And I went around the crowd and I was asking a bunch of different people who they were thrilled to see the most out of all the headliners for our concert. So we're going to go ahead and take a listen to a few of the people's responses to find out who was at least the number one person on top of people's minds.
Oh, great. Okay, cool.
Is it your first time at the Pride concert?
It is, yes.
Yeah? And then who are you most excited to see?
Probably Natasha Colin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And why is that?
I don't know. I've been a fan of his YouTube videos for a long time, and like always, I grew up with Disney, you know, everything Disney, and so he does a whole lot of the Disney stuff.
Yeah. And who are you, if any, I'm excited to see out of this lineup that we have today?
Tondrick.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
what I'm hearing. Yeah, we met him, what?
Like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
At one of his concerts, and he's amazing. So.
He was an absolute sweetheart. Yeah. Are there any other performers that you're looking forward to seeing?
I forget who the others are. I was so focused on Calum that
Yeah.
Wait, no, is Tondrick here today?
Yeah, everyone's really excited about that.
Is Tondrick coming? Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, Tondrick Hall, of course, yes. Yeah, Todrick's amazing, yeah.
Okay, so Todrick Hall. I mean, that was the person that everyone was really thrilled to hear was performing. I mean, for some people, they were kind of surprised that Todrick was showing up, and once they found out, they were just ecstatic. Are you familiar with Todrick Hall's work?
Yes, I am actually. I think he's an amazing performer and artist. I've actually seen him perform. And yeah, he has so much presence on stage and is such a role model for a lot of folks, queer folks as well, which I've seen. So yeah, that's been really amazing.
Yeah, the performance was beautiful. And like one of my favorite moments was when Todrick, during one of his songs, was saying like, everyone take out your fan and, you know, start fanning yourself. And everyone, like the majority of the crowd already had their fans like prepped, and all their hands went up into the air and they just flipped them open. You could hear them all just kind of flipped open at the same time, and they all just started waving them in the air. It was just super on point. Everyone was very much into it. Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great moment.
Yeah, he was a great performer, and everyone was very much into it and so excited to see him. So now it's not just the music and the dancing that are fun for Pride concerts. Of course, there's also just so much more meaning to the performances as well. So I had a very special opportunity to meet backstage with Shea Diamond after her performance at the Capitol Pride concert. Now, Diamond identified as a girl for as long as she can remember, and she was actually punished for it. So she ran away from home in Flint, Michigan as a teen, and by the age of 20, ended up robbing a convenience store at gunpoint because she said she was desperate to fund her gender-affirming surgery. Diamond was incarcerated at various men's correctional facilities in Michigan from 1999 to 2009, and this is when Diamond found her voice as a songwriter. After her release, she relocated to New York and entered the world of trans activism. So Singer to the Stars, Dustin Trannard, saw a video of Diamond singing at a Trans Lives Matter event, reached out to her, and is now the executive producer of Diamond's collection of anthems. So, Natasha, let's go ahead and listen in to some of her music and to this amazing interview that we got to have. And I was just really excited to hear about how you feel about performing at the Pride concert. And
it was amazing. Yeah. Absolutely amazing. I enjoyed myself. I never thought again I would be on, on the stage. Last year around this time I was protesting here, so it's my first time being here. So now I'm on the stage, so yeah, it's an honor.
So what's it like for you to be on the stage, the same place where you were protesting the year before?
Oh my God, it shows a little progress. It does. Yeah. It shows that we're doing something. They're listening to us a little bit, even the slightest. Yeah. And that we're expecting change. We're not giving up in these streets. So if they thought we weren't going to show up this year, they're mistaken.
That's amazing. And what does it mean to you to be performing at this particular Pride concert where they're celebrating or memorializing the 50 years since the Stonewall riots?
Yeah, it's very near and dear to me because I believe that we need to pay homage to our founding mothers, and those are the ones, and our founding fathers as well. I'm not going to just cite our founding mothers, but our founding fathers as well, because there were a lot of people that sacrificed their freedoms and put their life on the line so that we can be here. And they're not here to see it, so I think that we should celebrate it. We should celebrate in this moment, that we should be grateful for the opportunity to be here, because again, we're here on the backs of them. We did nothing to deserve this.
That's so beautiful. And what type of message do you hope that comes across to your listeners or your followers?
That our youth stay inspired, that they don't give up. So that once we are not able to pick up that load, that they're able to carry that load, because it's a hell of a load. Yeah. It's a hell of a fight. And for those who aren't in the center of it, I mean, they're enjoying the privileges, the fruits of our labor, but it's going to be their time. It's going to be a time where folks like me, we don't have too many more summers left. So, after we're going, who's going to stand up and pick up the fight? Yeah. And we need to make sure our youth are ready, prepared. We need to make sure that we take care of them, that they have all the things that we never had, that we couldn't be afforded because of that time. We're in a different time. We need to take care of our youth. Yeah. So everything else will fall into place if we take care of our youth. Yeah. I promise you.
Yes, absolutely.
Protect them in schools. Right. It's a dangerous time out there. Now they have to wear bulletproof jackets to go to school.
And backpacks, yeah.
We didn't have to do that.
Right.
So we know that the times are changing. So we need to make sure that we are conscious enough to be able to keep pushing forward a positive message, a hopeful message, a message of not giving up, of continuing the fight.
Right. And what do you think that mental health professionals can do to better support this effort?
Now, as far as mental health professionals, I think that they need to put themselves in the shoes of the people that they are treating. Because until you can live that experience, you'll never know how to correctly present yourself or present the issue. Right. Because to us, it's like a person on the outside looking in. We're always being judged. So when we talk about our story, even the mental health professionals, we feel like we're being judged. We're being judged in every single space. So just make it a judgment-free zone, and make sure that it's a loving zone, that it's opening, and that it's just affirming. And so people already know what they want to do. They know who they are. They just need to be assured, that they're going to be okay.
Yeah, they're in a safe space.
They're in a safe space,
Right. And what do you do to take care of your self-care, mental health?
Oh my God.
You're going through all of this. I mean, protesting one year, performing another. How do you take care of yourself?
Well, because we always get the phone calls, because a lot of my sisters, they work in these organizations, and they're the first person to hear about, they're the first people to actually hear about a trans person being killed. So I normally, as my friends, they'll give me a phone call, and we lost another one. And so for me, when I get those phone calls, the self-care that I need in that space is to make sure that my sisters are okay. It's to also pass that message on to them, to let them know that they need to stay out of harm's way. Because the more I hear about trans people dying, the more I worry about the people that I know and that I don't know. And because I know the lifestyle, I know that we're being judged by men and women. We don't get a break from neither one. We're not protected by either sex. But we're always reminded that we're not the sex that we say we are. We're always reminded that we're not who we say that we are. So I like to remind them that they are affirmed, that they are special, that their difference is unique, and that the world would be boring without them. And so always make sure that they're loved and protected.
Yeah. That's a beautiful message.
Then I'll feel good. I can rest that night then.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sorry about the tears.
No, thank you so much for being so authentic and sharing your story and your voice with everybody. It makes such a big impact.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so such a beautiful interview and moment that I was able to share with Shea Diamonds. Natasha, what were some of the thoughts or reactions that came up from you from that interview?
I mean, first of all, I just want to say how beautiful, her experience that she was talking about, and then, obviously what you were talking about, knowing, what she's been through and her experience through all of that. And, I mean, it's just amazing to just see her and see that she is able to perform and really, speak her truth. And that's really beautiful to see. And I think that, what she said about keeping the youth inspired and really helping them because they're the next generation of folks who are going to fight this fight. And it's going to look very different from the fight that, Diamond fought. And so helping train them for what's to be expected, especially with this political climate. I think there's many more battles to be fought. Gay marriage wasn't the end all be all. There's so many more battles. And so I think there's especially when you were talking about self-care, I think it's so important to be able to know how to take care of yourself because, you don't want to exhaust yourself, especially that is just this ongoing, you never know what to expect and what kind of, laws and policies are going to change or what challenges you're going to come up to. And I think it's also important that we teach youth about the history and where we have come from,
right.
Especially it being the 50th year of Stonewall. And so knowing just like how it's changed and it keeps, this is the movement that is the most rapidly evolving. So it is kind of easy to lose sight of like how far we've come because it just changes so much and we get lost in that a little bit. And so I think it's important to, stay grounded in knowing where we came from and knowing how to continue fighting. And so I think that's really important.
Right. I agree.
But really, yeah.
Shea Diamond had a lot of really great points, and it seems like you agree so much with her about how we all do need to pay attention to like all the people that fought to help all of us get to where we're at today, socially, politically. And yet there's still so much more that needs to be done. And I know that through your work, you help with this process, both in training youth and training mental health professionals, training workplaces to better understand LGBTQIA factors. Could you tell us more about like how you've dedicated your work to kind of help with this process that Shea Diamond's talking about?
Sure, of course. Yeah, I'd love to. So a lot of my work is through going into different spaces and educating people. And it's not so much about trying to change people's minds. It's merely about giving them the tools to better understand the LGBTQ community, to work with LGBTQ folks. And so a lot of the training is around, language, of course. And so language is a huge thing in our community because new language is being created all the time. Yeah. And part of this is to, help people feel more validated in their identity because there's so many different ways to identify. And I think it's such a beautiful thing is like identity is essentially expanding. And people are finding more language to identify and to feel valid in that. And so, that's one part of it. Another part is, best practices. So understanding how to be able to support LGBTQ folks in not just in the workplace or where, you see clients or whoever you work with, but also in your friends and family networks. And so I think that's really important. What we teach and what we educate on is something that doesn't just help them in the moment, but it helps them in all aspects of life. And I think that's something that they can carry through and really go on and, be that ally. And I feel like we're all allies in some way because, I'm an ally to the trans community, to the bi community. And so even in the LGBTQ community, we can all be allies in some way as well and all learn, more ways to help support each other. So a lot of it really focused on that and just bringing a visibility awareness to the community as well.
Right. That's absolutely right. And what I appreciate about the work that you do with Expanding Identities is that you work with both the youth to help prepare them, but it doesn't just end there. I mean, we could prepare our youth as much as possible, but if they then go out into the world that's still not as evolved as they can be, then they're going to continue to struggle. So it needs to happen on both ends, both with our youth and with our adults who they'll
100%,
be interacting with,
Yep, 100%.
And so one of the pivotal moments in the interview was when I asked Shea Diamond about, what she does for self-care and mental health. And, this brought up a reflection for her to think about like some of the intense moments that she's had on her journey is when she finds out, she gets a call from someone saying that, we've lost another. And she rightfully got, emotional during that reflection because part of her self-care is really wanting to make sure that others are okay and that they are out of harm's way and that they're protected and safe. How do we, both as for myself as an ally and people within the community, how do we all support each other through that?
That's I feel a difficult question because it's such a large topic of this idea of this, women or trans women of color are the most at risk for, being murdered or being harmed. And that's extremely, extremely problematic and extremely saddening and just heartbreaking. And I think with just more visibility, awareness, and support and understanding, and just like people being more aware of what's going on, I think that there needs to be the awareness and then the conversations around it, because I feel like if people are going to just be like, it can't be normalized, because then when it becomes normalized, then people stop getting angry about it or stop, wanting to do something about it. And so I think if people still become outraged and start these conversations and really want to change the culture and, really put themselves out there and speak out about it, I think that's what's really going to make a change. But if people think that, oh, this is just something normal, then they're more likely to be complacent about it and not really do anything about it, because they're like, oh, this is just the norm now and it's someone else's responsibility. But I don't think that's true. I think it's everyone's responsibility, allies included, who even aren't in the LGBTQ community, because this isn't, we're talking about a human here. We're not talking about LGBT rights. We're talking about people, humans that are being murdered that for no reason but just wanting to be themselves.
Right.
So,
and absolutely. And I think one of the most dangerous things that we see in life is when we dehumanize another person. That seems
completely.
And then when we just, as you mentioned, accept, what's going on. I mean, when we look at statistics, these aren't just numbers. These are human lives that we're talking about. And it has a big impact, not just on the individual, but on their entire community, to hear this day in and day out. And so it is really important that we address all of these things and take them all very seriously, while also taking care of ourselves and others. So thank you so much for mentioning all of that. That was all very useful. And we'll make sure to include Expanding Identities information and any resources you want to share on witandreason.com, so that way our listeners can have more access to learn more and to better understand what they can do. And now another headliner from Capitol Pride Concert had an important message to share with the crowd. Singer Calum Scott focused on the importance of the support he received from his mother when he first came out. So, Natasha, unfortunately, Calum didn't receive such a supportive and loving response from his friends. Now, of course, like in an ideal situation, a person wouldn't have to, come out at all. People wouldn't place their own narratives and expectations on others that each individual will have to later on correct. But when a person does come out, what do you recommend friends and family do or say?
No, that's a great question. It's a question that I definitely get a lot of. And so I think in this process, first of all, I just want to say there's different ways of coming out, because of course, with sexual orientation and gender identity, those coming out processes look very different. And so, and especially with, intersectionality, like a person from a large city that, maybe, white presenting and cis and coming out as gay if they're male identified is going to look very different than someone in a very small town who is a person of color and coming out as trans. And so, you have to be aware and mindful of like the spaces those people exist in and what the coming out process looks like in both of those situations. So, and especially with believing people when they come out to you and not thinking, are you sure, or questioning them at all, I think is really important because, as we've seen, gender especially shows up as young as 3 years old. So there could be a lot of, folks questioning youth being like, well, are you really sure? And it's like, no, they, it's at this age, they definitely know who they are. And it's people who are older that are questioning them that make them question their identity when they already knew what it was.
Right.
So I think it also in someone's lifespan, there could be multiple coming out processes as people learn more language to identify and feel valid in. I think that they could have multiple coming out processes. And I heard something really beautiful a few years ago that someone was like, for me, it's not so much coming out, it's about letting people in. And I thought that was really beautiful. And so it's, there's this whole, we talk about pride and, being proud of ourselves and coming out. And that's amazing, and we need those spaces, but it's also sometimes not the safest place for a lot of people who aren't out. And so finding those few people that they can identify to let in and, just be able to talk about their feelings, even if they haven't identified as part of the LGBTQ community yet, just finding someone who they think will be supportive and who can listen to them and who won't assume their identity for them and won't put a label on them, but just allow them to have the space to talk about what they're feeling about, what their experience has been, and just letting it be that way and not being judgmental at all and just staying open. So I think that's one of the, the most important things when someone comes out to you, and not pressuring them to come out to anyone else and, assessing their safety, because that's also really important as well, and just validating them. So I think, those are really important things. And also continuing to do your own research as an ally. If someone comes out to you, find resources, then you could, maybe that's the way you can support this person coming out to you, is that you could, do research for them and be like, hey, and that shows that you care and that you really are invested in them and that you're doing your own research and, putting the effort into wanting to be in that process with them. And that can be such a huge support.
Right. Instead of just relying on the person who's already just, in the middle of everything, going through everything. Don't just rely on them to be your source of information. There's plenty of resources out there at this point to learn more on your own.
Completely.
Do you have any recommendations on where people could go to learn more and to educate themselves?
Yeah. So there's a few websites. I know that GLAAD is a great one. And then I have a list of resources that I can also give you.
Okay, good.
Because there's so many out there. And that's the thing, is there are going to be some, obviously the internet is full of so many different information sources, and some of them have misinformation on their websites. And also the language changes. So it's going to, if people need to stay current with what they're putting on their website. But I think, GLAAD is definitely one. So GLAAD. And then also any LGBT center is going to have a list of resources for folks, not just online, but, places in their area of residence that they can kind of go to and actually go to a place and ask people questions about the community and about information they're looking for.
And there's hotlines too that are available for, let's say, the individual who's in a rural community that doesn't have anybody in person to really connect to and understand what they're going through, that they could call and find some kind of at least virtual community that they could connect with as well in a safe space.
Yeah, most definitely. So Trevor Project is the biggest one that comes to mind, and that's for LGBTQ youth, I believe 25 and under, and they have a hotline. They also have a chat line, and you can text with them, so you don't necessarily have to call in. They also, about a year or two ago, there is now a trans hotline. So it's specifically trans folk who are serving other trans folks. So that's been an amazing support for a lot of people. So that's a national hotline as well that people can call into. I know that Teen Line is another one. It's a teen-to-teen hotline, suicide prevention hotline. It's not necessarily LGBTQ, but they do get LGBTQ training. Okay. So that's another great support. But there's many out there. But Trevor Project is the biggest one there is. So.
Okay, we'll add all of these to our website at witandreason.com. Let's close today's show with the song that brought tears to all of our eyes at the DC Pride concert. It's titled No Matter What by Calum Scott.
When I was a young boy, I was scared of growing up. I didn't understand it, but I was terrified of love. Felt like I had to choose, but it was out of my control. I needed to be safe, I was going crazy on my own. It took me years to tell my mother I expected the worst.
You can put all of this wisdom into action today. Visit witandreason.com to see music videos, educational articles, and community resources. Also to connect with me, Dr. Alexis Moreno, and co-founder of Expanding Identities Development, Natasha Colin. Did you hear something on the show today that you relate to on a personal level? Share your story. Send us your recording on witandreason.com, and we may be able to post it on our Capitol Pride concert show page to help others navigate their health and well-being. A special thank you to Natasha and DC Radio. And of course, thank you all for listening. Stay posted on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Wit and Reason and DC Radio for our next show. I'm Dr. Alexis Moreno. Let's keep the conversation going.
You've been listening to Wit and Reason with psychologist Dr. Alexis Moreno. For more information, visit witandreason.com.